Yeah, hi everybody. It's still the 27th of November 2009. I had to change my gear, I got cold. In the previous little snip, the video posting I put up, we were talking about ClimateGate. It was ClimateGate C, and this is ClimateGate D, I presume. And the way it works is, I was trying to show that governments constantly embrace legitimate science and pseudoscience. Whatever science is there that suits their interests on the day, they will embrace it if it's going in the direction that they want to go politically. And whatever science is there that supports them, or if they don't have a science, they'll make it up. They'll make one up. And the reason they're able to do that is they own all the science faculties. The vast majority of the science faculties in the Western world, they get their money. The money comes for the faculty and the universities, professors in the faculties and all the rest of it, from the state. Now, I showed you how in the 16th century and in the 17th century and the 18th century you had these pseudosciences. So I just want to quickly go through the 19th, 20th, 21st, and then we'll have a little synopsis of the thing. Right? In the 19th century, the years of the British raised to power, industrial power, the emergence of the Industrial Revolution. It was the motive force behind the emergence of Britain as the dominant force in the world. Okay, Britain built this massive empire all over the world, and it wanted to show the empire has been benign, even though we know the old imperial design is ruthless and it's backed essentially by naval power, naval and army power. That's at the end of the day, that's what it's backed by. But they wanted to show that it was scientifically benign. So they embraced this science called phrenology, and it divided the scientific world for most of the 19th century. And then when it suited its purpose and Britain had its empire built, it didn't matter anymore if it became discredited. But up until that time, everybody was bought off to show that it wasn't discredited. And it was this mad science, the pseudoscience, that said that you could measure people's intelligence and measure their genetic disposition and a lot of things, all to do with their what would you call it, their intelligence and their as I say, their social dispositions and their behaviour patterns, etc., by measuring bumps on the external elements of their cranium. In other words, bumps on their skull. You go around and measure, take with calipers and various things, take measurements of them, and as a result of that, and a whole science grew up. Of course we know it's all rubbish. Anyway, end of the 20th century, we have the emergence of fascism. And what happened with the fascists is they did a simple thing. I have to admit about the fascist thing, it's very easy to study him because it's not cloaked in all this duplicity and all this lies and all. Your man was just dead straightforward, dead open. The madman Hitler, just dead straight, dead open, just took over the whole scientific community. Anybody put up any opposition, they were just taken and put into a fucking camp, into a labour camp, or into an extermination camp if you were an ideological opponent to them. But anybody who opposed them, say on an ongoing basis, and didn't want to do the rocket experiments, or didn't want to do the medical genetic experiments and all that, they would have been put in the labour camp, worked to death. Okay, and that's how they dealt with it. So what they had was this whole scientific fraternity, and they had them bought. The bulk of them bought. There are a number of them in the Nazi party. The leaders of them, all the senior professors and all that, were all members of the Nazi party. And the ones who weren't, as I say, the remainder of them were bought off, and they were just given direction. And if they deviated from the direction they were given in the slightest, they were just carted off. You never heard of them again. So that's how at least they were honest about it. It was a degree of honesty and openness about it. It wasn't couched in all this democracy and couched in all this business of what would you call it, attempting to show freedom and all. There was no word about any of that stuff. So you have to admire them from that point of view. They were just open about it. They were just fucking brutal thugs. That's all they were. But to say that we are brutal thugs, beyond an all illusion. Look at it. We wear uniforms and jackboots. We're not wearing these jackboots for nothing. These aren't to go to ballet classes. We're making a statement. This is what we are. instead of what we have today. You know, we've wolves dressed up in sheep's clothing. Anyway, so we then move on to the 24th century. 24th century, science has stood on its head in one day. 9/11 happens, and civil engineering, physics and mechanical engineering are all flipped over in one day. 2 aircraft hit 2 buildings in Lower Manhattan. Buildings are about 120 stories each. Massive skyscrapers. At one stage the highest in the world. Built to the most exacting standards. They could withstand hurricanes. 2 small aircraft hit them. Alright? 2 medium-sized aircraft which flew around in the sky for hours before they did all that. We all know that. Flew around for several hours. Banged into them. Okay? They fall into their own imprint in the morning. And then later on in the afternoon, about 4 or 5 hours later, a building 7, number 7, which is adjacent to them, 300 or 400 feet away, maybe a couple of hundred yards away, it decides it's going to fall. And it's 54 stories high. And it falls into its own footprint. Never happened before in the history of mankind. You think of all the tens of thousands of skyscrapers all over all the major cities of the world, everywhere in the world. Skyscrapers everywhere. They didn't fall. None of them have ever fallen. And in the future, none of them will ever fall either. But on that day, it suited America, so science was stood on its head. We had a pseudoscience day. And nobody has said dick about it. Nobody has said a boo about it or anything else. So really what this ClimateGate is, ClimateGate's just an extension of that. This has been going on from day one. You know, the Romans did it, the Egyptians did it. I try to show by just practical examples. There's in the last few centuries how it stood in the interest of the people that ran society for it to be in their interest. So that's about it. Look, no one has come along and said this science, it's there, it's obvious, you can test it. Look, our contribution to climate change. There is climate change. Climates change all the time. The Romans came to Britain and they grew vines for red wine and white wine. They grew them all over Britain. You can't do that today because the temperature's too low. How were the Romans able to do it? How were the Romans able to do it in AD 40 and AD 60 right up to the 5th century until they left Britain? They did it. It's documented in the Roman tracts. It's documented, written up. What about the medieval warming period? There was no man-made pollutants then. There was no industrial revolution to burn oil or any of that stuff then. That medieval warming period lasted 200 or 300 years. The Earth was a lot warmer. I believe it was 3 or 4 degrees warmer than it is today. And what about the empirical stuff that you can see today? Go into any of the art galleries of the world. You can see Peter Bruegel and all the little masters of the Flemish school where they did the drawings and the paintings. Well, the sea froze over. The sea froze over. It got so cold. The winters used to last 8 and 9 months. We have a thing called a furnace. Our star is an enormous furnace. To put it in I'll give you just very, very quickly. If you took the top off the star, our star, the sun, 1 million Earths could fit into the star. 1 million Earths could fit inside the star. And you mean to tell me that us as puny little creatures on this planet, we're influencing the planet, the heating or the cold, the warming or the cooling of the planet? Get real. Get real. Man's arrogance is only matched by his stupidity and his foolishness. And his lack of insight. That's all it's matched by. What a crowd we are. What a crowd we are. But it suits America's interest. It suits Britain's interest. They want to stop the development of China. They want to stop the pace of the development of China. And no better way than controlling their industrial output. That's what this is about. Nothing more, nothing less.